Water. It's the lifeblood of the world. Makes up about 70% of you and I. Fact is, nothing you've ever known could have happened without it. We're born of it, some of us die of it, and the rest live to tell the tale. Across every great civilization, there are stories of great floods, deluges which drown the land and nearly every living thing on it. Today, we'll be taking a look at these stories, the historical and archaeological evidence tied to them, and what these narratives can tell us about the people telling them.
I'm Hawk Tallman.
And I'm Jacob McKenna,
This is Under the Dirt.
and we are the Fossil Fellas. Hawk, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. One thing I would like to say to our audience is we are deeply sorry for the, what is it now? 4 months of radio silence.
Yeah, it's been a minute. We've been busy. We've been busy.
We've been busy. We're busy guys. Well, not Jacob. Jacob's not very busy.
Okay, all right.
What do you do all day, Jacob?
I'm not talking about that here. I get busy. I'd also like to point out I've been ready to record for at least 2 months. Hawk's been the one pushing it back.
Okay, okay. That's not necessarily true. But yeah, there's a long list of, what am I trying to say? A long list of setbacks. However, keep in mind, we do have upcoming episodes planned. We got like several on the list, but stay tuned. We'll talk about those later. But let's get into the flood myths.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, who start? I'm starting. Shut up. Uh,
Okay.
I mean, a lot of people, especially those growing up in the West, are very familiar with the idea of like an ancient flood myth. Most of that comes from Christianity, right? Because one of the areas that you do find these types of flood myths is in the Abrahamic religious traditions, right?
Right. For
Um,
example,
but what,
when we all know Noah's Ark, right?
yeah, Noah's Ark. However, it should be noted, and we're going to talk about it, that the idea of a flood myth is found in almost every culture worldwide. Almost every single one on all the continents in almost every country there is some conception of like a great flood, right? And we'll get into this. I don't think some of them meet the mark to technically be considered the same thing. Okay, here's how I'm going to put it. I think we should make the standard, and maybe this is a little, bias because me and Jacob have grown up in the West, but I think we should make the standard of a flood myth the Abrahamic one because that's what most people imagine when you mention it, right?
Right. Yeah. So a lot of when you look up, flood narratives from different cultures, you'll get a very long list of, oh, here's this one, here's that one, and it's great that these are being documented, but they aren't. Not all flood narratives are. Uh, some flood narratives are more equal than others. You feel me?
And some of them, I would say aren't in flood narratives. I don't
Yeah.
know, it might just be the way they're told, but some of them, one in particular, that I'm like, I don't really think this counts, right?
Right.
But we'll get into that. Actually, hold up, let's start with that one, or should we quickly start with the Abrahamic one just to set the?
Right. Just to
Let's
set
start
the
with
bar.
yeah. Okay, you want to do that? Actually, no, I'm gonna do it. Shut up.
Oh, twice
So
already. Okay.
yeah, so the Noah's Ark story, as anyone who's grown up in an Abrahamic tradition knows, is that the world is filled with evil and corruption, but Noah is a godly man, right? So God decides that he's going to send a flood to destroy the earth because all the humans on it are evil, right? Um, so, however, Noah's a godly man, so God chooses Noah to build an ark and to put on the ark two of every animal. Two of every animal. And then God floods the world, and the world is flooded for 40 days and 40 nights. And then the earth dries up, and the humans and animals repopulate it. That's the gist, right? I mean, we could go deeper into it, of course, right? And maybe some of these things might pop up, like the Book of Enoch.
I know of it.
You heard of this? Yeah, so the Book of Enoch is a longer telling of the Noah's Ark narrative.
Really?
So yeah, so it's kind of interesting. For instance, one of the evils that are counted among humanity are uh is sorcery, and they get the sorcery. This is also where the Nephilim come from. Do you know of the Nephilim?
Yes, I know of the Nephilim. Our audience might not, but
I know of the Nephilim. So essentially, the Book of Enoch describes that fallen angels descend upon Earth and they teach humanity witchcraft, and they breed with human women, and those women give birth to the Nephilim.
which are
Um,
essentially
that's
giants.
at least which are essentially giants. Yeah, that's how it's described in the Book of Enoch. Um, the Nephilim are briefly mentioned in like the one you find in Genesis, but it's not really they
It's
aren't
not
really
important
put
to
into any.
biblical canon.
It's not important. They're just there, right? It's just
Anyways,
like they're briefly mentioned and they're gone.
yeah, we're getting a
But yeah,
little
so
off
the Book of
topic.
Enoch. All right, but the Book of Enoch is a longer retelling of that story.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the gist of it.
And it's I will point out the Noah's Ark story is very unique amongst flood narratives, as we'll see, because it's very specific. It lists the length of the flood, 40 days, 40 nights. It goes into the details of the ark itself. It goes, as you said in the Tale of Enoch, it describes the evils of the world, why uh, the God was mad. But all that aside, I want to so the Noah's Ark narrative, we would categorize, Hawk and I have both separately in our research come to the conclusion that there are three types of flood narratives. The Noah's Ark
You have
narrative,
done that. I haven't done that.
you haven't. I thought we
I haven't
oh,
done.
never mind then.
No, no, no. I have. I don't know. I don't know. I just have them bouncing around my head. I haven't really put them into categories, but I definitely have the category that I think you're about to talk about.
Yeah. So what I would call the Noah's Ark narrative is a destructive flood narrative.
Hmm.
And the destructive flood narrative, as we just saw, is categorized by an evil, sorry, not evil, an angry creator punishing evil people.
Hmm.
The other two categories that I have are creative and then alternative. And we'll see some
Okay, that's
examples of
fair.
those later.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's that, and here I know you're the one who looked into the Hebrew. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, yeah. So before we go into other flood narratives from around the world, I want to talk about the Noah's narrative a little bit more. There is a common misconception that it was a global flood, right? Um, Firstly, there's no archaeological evidence for a global flood. There was
Partially, partially.
partially.
Uh, we'll get into this. We'll get into this. Not when humans are on Earth.
Yeah, yeah. So within the human time frame, there has not been one flood which covered the entirety of the globe, right? And
Hmm.
there was obviously never one point where humanity was down to one family. That just isn't possible. What there
Yep.
is evidence for, both in the scripture and in the archaeology of the region, is a large local flood around uh, the lands of it would have been Judea at the time.
Well, I mean, not when these books are being written. Yeah, it would have been Judea. Uh, but not when like the Noah's Ark. Like what's it called? Because the in the story the Ark falls down and the Ark is said to rest on the mountain of Anarat, and that is in Turkey.
Mm,
But the area, right? So Judea,
right.
modern day
The
modern day
old
Israel,
world,
Palestine.
the cradle of humanity, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so obviously the archaeological evidence for this, and Hawk, you can go into this a little further because I think you're more knowledgeable on it. But when you have large scale floods, there are certain layers of, I believe, silt and just other material that gets deposited, and that's evidence for
Yep.
historical floods.
Hmm.
And we just don't see that. covering the entire earth at the time described in the narrative.
Yep.
Within the scripture itself, and this is where a lot of the information or misinterpretation comes from. It's often translated as the whole earth or the whole land, right? When you look at the original Hebrew, it is eretz or kol eretz, which is often what gets translated as whole earth. But this can also be translated as land, ground, country, or soil. And according to a lot of the sources I've seen, it's more often interpreted as like land or country, right? So when they say
Mhm.
kol eretz in the Hebrew, it most likely means the whole world as they know it, the whole land of, uh, again, you said it would have been Turkey at the time or modern day
Well, I
Turkey?
mean, well, I mean, that's where so like these books would have been being written like
In that day.
as Jewish culture went about, but the event happens in Turkey. But like, yeah.
Yeah. So the whole land as they knew it, right? Um, so what this means is that it is a large flood, certainly, but it's not global, right?
Mhm.
Imagine if you're it's their whole world, not the whole global world, but the whole world as they know it, which at the
Mhm.
time would have been not it would have been Turkey, uh, in the Middle East, and
Mhm.
that's about it. Some of Africa, you know.
Yep.
It's like when what's that one quote? Alec was it Alexander? Alexander wept for there were no more worlds to conquer, and yet then you look at the map and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, there's the whole east, south, and north of him.
Yeah, he did, but like Alexander did not. Like hot take, I think Alexander the Great is. I think he's a little overrated.
Maybe, but the point stands. It's the whole world as humanity knew it at the time. We were not well. Depends on. We were not fully global, right? We weren't globe spanning species. Anyways, all that to
I mean, there
say,
were humans. There were humans all over the globe, but not all humans knew that there were humans. Does that make
yeah,
sense?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
All that to say, Noah's Ark was not a global flood, but rather a large, localized one.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So there's the groundworks for like very titular flood narrative because when people say flood narratives, most of the time they are comparing them to Noah's Ark uh and such, right? So let's move to another one. Let's talk about the Egyptian one and why I don't really think it should be lumped. It's not really the same thing, if that makes sense.
Right.
Um, so in so the Egyptian one goes that and it's told differently. Sometimes it's certain people who have so it follows Ra, right? And there are people who have either wronged Ra or there are people who are unfaithful, evil and unfaithful people, right? So Ra and this gets you into another part of Egyptian mythology that I don't really understand. Um so so Ra has his daughter what's her name? Um
Sekhmet?
that's who she turns into.
Ah,
Uh I think it's Horus.
that sounds
There's
about right.
Ra's daughter. There's Ra's daughter's Horus. Oh shoot. Actually, hold up. No, this is bad. Let me just look through my notes real quick.
Yeah. Take your time.
Hathor. So there's Ra's daughter Hathor. And he turns her into Sekhmet.
Hmm.
But Sekhmet and Hathor are still viewed as different deities.
I see.
Which I find interesting. And this is me not really under if you know about Egyptian mythology, please leave it in the please correct me in the comments. Um but he turns Hathor, who is this like fertility mother goddess, into Sekhmet, which is the goddess of war, and sends her to destroy the parts of humanity that have been unfaithful unfaithful and evil, right? Um, now the now, however, Sekhmet becomes overzealous in her destruction, so Ra gets, and it changes sometimes. Sometimes it's the faithful humans, sometimes it's the other gods, but they dye a bunch of beer, blood, or red, so Sekhmet believes it's blood, and she drinks it, and she gets drunk, and she gets knocked out. Um, so, so I'm pretty sure you can already see why I don't really feel like this one fits in with the Abrahamic flood myth, if it's even a flood myth at all. Um, so you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's
Okay, so
it's
so so
lumped in often with other flood narratives, but it's not the traditional flood narrative.
yeah, so it definitely carries the theme of an angry god punishing evil humans, right?
Hmm.
But it isn't really a flood, right? Now it was celebrated. The Egyptians did have a tradition based off of this story where they would drink wine during the Nile floods, and to the Egyptian people, the Nile flood was seen very positively, right? The flood,
Right.
not so much a destructive thing, right? Because when the Nile floods is when they were able, they were able to uphold their agriculture.
Hmm.
Um, so it definitely carries that part, but it's not like this beer dyed red flooded the earth and wiped out humanity, right?
Yeah, I've also read another retelling was it was wine, wine being naturally red in its color. That is what they used rather than dyed beer.
Yeah,
So different retellings.
yeah, different retellings, but it doesn't really fit.
Yeah, but let's put a pin in that real quick. We'll come back to it later, because that's still somewhat in the region. You know, Egypt not so far from um, the biblical lands, right? Let's go
Mhm.
across the ocean, right? And let's look at some North American uh, flood narratives.
Ooh, okay. Okay, this gets into one of my things. I don't know if we want to save North America for last, because North America is where I want to talk about some stuff, maybe a little more in depth.
Oh, all right. We
All
can
right, you
work.
said you said you had a finished one, right? That you didn't feel like fit the standard narrative.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna try and do this without looking at my notes too much. So the Finnish have a narrative that involves a flood, but not one of water. So as the story goes, there's this great hero, Vanamoinen, who I'm not an expert in Finnish mythology, but I do believe he is like a great hero held in high regard by the Finnish peoples, at least, you know, ancient Finnish peoples. And
Mhm,
the long and short of it is he goes into battle, receives a wound on either his knee or his toe. Both are
mhm,
mentioned, but from this wound flows forth a flood of blood and viscera, which covers the land, right?
uh-huh,
But and that's the long and short of it. What this to me, what am I trying to say? This flood narrative, as opposed to the Abrahamic or the Egyptian, seems to me more of a retelling of a great battle, right?
mhm.
I didn't look too
Like it's
deeply in.
more
Go ahead.
it's more metaphorical, right?
Absolutely, that's the word I was
Like
looking for.
his
Metaphorical.
wound was so great it flooded the earth.
Yeah, not even that
I think.
necessarily, but if I and again I'm no Nordic history or religious expert, but if
He
we
likes
look
to
at
think
I like to think I am, of course. You're so
he's a
right.
larper.
So if we look at Vanamoinen as a stand-in for humanity or you know any group of Finnish people, we can assume that this is a metaphor for a great battle or a great loss of life in a violent manner, right? Uh, I mean, blood-soaked lands. That's a pretty heavy-handed metaphor, I'd say. So it's not too far of a reach, I don't think.
Mhm,
Right, and then that, along with the Sekhmet story, I think we would classify as alternative flood narratives, right? Like I mentioned before, we have
Yeah, for sure.
creative, destructive, and alternative. My classification, now these are not official in any manner. These are just what I've come up with based off of reading various narratives. I would say alternative is any narrative containing a flood, um, or a flooding of some sort, right?
Mhm.
It's a very liberal definition of flood narrative, but still, a narrative with a flood.
Yep.
And then I know
Uh,
we're trying to focus. Do you have something to say?
yeah, I wanted to move on to Southeast Asia.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say I have one
Okay.
more alternative narrative from Europe that we would cover first.
Oh, let's hear it.
So this is I found this one very interesting. It's tied to the Noah's Ark narrative, but it itself is not a flood. It's
Mhm.
coming from the, and I'm gonna try to pronounce this best I can, but I'm not an Irish speaker. I don't speak Gaeilge. The Lebor Gabala Eran, the Book of
Mhm.
Ireland's Taking, was a supposed to be a history of the Irish people from their inception, right? Specifically through
Mhm.
a Christian lens. The author, who I don't know their name, but they were a Christian, and they specifically Christianized a lot of narratives to put it into this book, right?
Mm.
And so the claim made in this book is that the first people in Ireland were led by, let me pull it up here, the names. 1 second. Where is it? Ah, Kasher, daughter of Bith, son of Noah. So Noah's granddaughter, according to this Lebor Gabala Erin, was one of the leaders of the first people to land on the island of Ireland. Uh, and
Mm.
it claims that they came there 40 days before the Noah flood, um, and were told to go there in order to escape said flood, right?
Mhm.
This is
Yeah.
likely, like I said, this was a Christianized narrative. It's most likely this is a Christianization of an earlier secular or pagan narrative.
Mhm.
I say most
That's,
likely. It must be because it goes, well, not must be, but most likely is because it implies that within 2 generations of Noah, there were people in Ireland
uh
arriving from Turkey to Ireland, and that's not really. I don't believe that's possible.
yeah, probably not, no.
Yeah,
Most likely not.
yeah. So that's
Um,
not a
yeah,
flood
that
narrative, like I said, but I find it very interesting that one of the earlier histories of Ireland has that tie-in.
yeah,
Credible
that's
or not.
yeah, you know what that kinda reminds me of? Have you read Beowulf?
I think I once, but it was a long time ago.
Beowulf has a line kind of like that, where it's kind of this like as Scandinavia is starting to become Christian, right? It's written in that era. That's when Beowulf was written.
Right.
So it definitely it paints Beowulf as this Nordic pagan hero, right? More in their how the Scandinavians would have told sagas and stories, right?
Right.
Um, but it makes a lot of references to Christianity. Like for instance, oh shoot, I don't remember entirely. It's been a long time, but I remember that there's a part where it mentions that the giants were all destroyed in the flood, and
Mm,
that's the reason there's no more giants, right? Is because God destroyed them in the flood. Um, so yeah, it's kind of like that uh, where Christianity is starting to meld with these pagan ideas, right?
right.
Yeah, that just reminded me of that.
Yeah. So again, not a flood narrative, but tied to one.
Yeah,
So
for
you said you
sure.
wanted to move on to South America,
Southeast Asia or
Southeast
Asia
Asia.
in
Sorry.
general. Yeah, yeah,
Go
yeah.
for it.
So it's interesting. The list we're using of flood narratives lists, at least I was lists Wu the Great um in there, and I don't know if I technically agree with that. So so do you know who Wu the Great was?
I've seen the name. I didn't look too much into but I believe that's the Chinese narrative, right?
Yeah, but here's the deal: it's not really a narrative.
Mm.
It's kind of just like, and it's not even like mythologizing history. It's more just like buffing it out, right? Like how Alexander the Great has a bunch of feats given to him, right? That are
Right.
kind of like raging on the supernatural. But Wu the Great was the first king of China, and he became the first. Well, as you know, the Yellow River in China, it would flood and it would devastate the land. People would die, things would be destroyed, and Wu the Great was the first person to figure out how to stop the Yellow River from flooding.
Right.
So he is crowned first king of China. There's that one in there. I don't really feel like that's a good flood narrative.
Yeah, that one.
Like that's not really a narrative. That's just history.
Yeah, for sure.
This is our understanding of history, but I found really interesting was Southeast Asia. So I know I'm gonna butcher this name. Uh, Dang Dang Nic Van. Uh, he's from Vietnam. He is the head of the Department of Religion. Um, in Vietnam's largest university. Uh, he did research throughout all of Southeast Asia, where he went around and he essentially interviewed local populations on flood myths, and he counted 307 different flood myths across Southeast Asia.
Wow.
This including Vietnam, Laos, Thailand, uh, Malaysia, and Taiwan. Um, so one of the things he gets into is how a lot of it follows kind of the same. All of them have similar structures, right? Sometimes it's God, sometimes it's forces of nature, but the earth is going to be flooded, right?
Mhm.
And something tells the protagonist, right, that the earth is going to flood, right? This might be a dream, this might be a god, this might be, something, right? Um, the world is flooded, and then our protagonist repopulates the earth with another human, right?
Right.
That is the general gist that he found. um However, in almost all of them, something about one of those different variables was different, right? So sometimes it's not necessarily God, but it's just forces of nature. Sometimes the reason for the world being flooded is the earth is flooding, or sometimes it is just it's an active, it's a natural happening, right?
Right.
Um, and even he mentions even in the stories where, here, if I can get the exact quote. Yeah, in the majority of the tales above, although gods caused the floods, the theme of God punishing humankind is not evident. Within Southeast Asia, the concept of supreme being punishing humankind exists only in tales on a small number of ethnic groups that have higher degrees of socioeconomic development and may have been influenced by exogenous religions. I find that really interesting that isn't really a theme that's present,
Yeah, that is fascinating.
even if it is God's doing it. That's not right. Even if it is God's flooding the earth, not because humanity has done some slight. That isn't the main point of the story.
That is.
I found that very interesting.
Yeah. I can already think of a few reasons of why that could be, but we'll get into that later. I do wanna ask, are there themes of, well, I guess, do any of these narratives go into the rebuilding that comes after?
Not really. It's just the protagonist repopulates the earth.
I see, okay. So, that's fascinating. Let's move on now to the Americas.
Okay, okay. I want to leave North America for last.
Okay, South America
Do
it is
you
then.
have? Yeah, I didn't really look into those ones. You got them right.
I have a few, they're
Let's hear it.
all, here, let me pull this up real quick. I did focus more on North America, um, without going too deep into any of them. It's a lot of the same. The Aztec have, where there is a quote unquote worldwide flood, and only I'm gonna try and pronounce this. Cox is the only male
Mhm,
survivor. Um, the Mayan have what is called the Popol Vuh account, right? And their god Hurakan wiped out the wood people with flood. I didn't like I said, I didn't look too deeply into these, but again, it's just a lot of the same, right? A lot of an angry deity flooding the world, right? There is one from the Mapuche or Mapuche, which has
mhm,
two great. Let me pull it up and refresh my memory real quick. But as I recall, it has two great snakes which end up flooding the world.
mhm.
Let me just skimming through it again real quick. Yeah. Yeah. So it's the tale of two great snakes, and one of them, I believe, floods the world and the other helps humanity. Um, the reason I found that one interesting is because it's not the only flood narrative that has to deal with a great snake.
Right.
So that's, you know, I probably should have gone into deeper depth with these South American narratives, but uh, at the time in my research, I was like, okay, this is the same I've seen elsewhere.
Mhm. Uh, all right, let's touch on North America. Before we get into North America, I think it's to note that that North America has way more flood narratives than any other country or continent.
Oh yeah.
Specifically in North America, just on resources, I counted 21. Um, Keep that in mind. The second highest. Now these are like individuals. Okay, so right. For instance, Dr. Dang Ning Van. Or, I'm definitely not pronouncing that correctly. I'm sorry if any of you speak Vietnamese. He counted 307 flood myths. However, that number is coming from whether or not right any difference in the story is counted as a different flood myth. Right. So that would kind of be like if we counted the Abrahamic as 3 flood myths instead of 1.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Right. So it's kind of like that. I don't feel like it's the same as it is with North America, where they are individualized, distinct flood myths.
Yeah.
Um, I don't feel like it's the same, but that should be mentioned that North America has way more. And North America is also where I found the creative flood myths.
Yes. I found these
Yeah.
as well.
Do you want to get into that? Do you want to get into that?
Sure, sure. So, like we mentioned prior, there were creative, destructive, and alternative flood myths. We've only so far gone over destructive and alternative. In North America, we find a lot of flood narratives that I have labeled as creative. What I mean by creative is these are creation narratives that are intertwined with flood narratives. What we'll typically see, and I'll get into some specific examples in a minute, is that there is a land prior, right? That land
Mhm.
is entirely flooded, and some figure, right, a hero or a deity or something to that extent, typically with the help of an animal, will create a new land, right? Um,
Yep.
so I have here a Micmac account, right? And I'm just gonna it's short, it's sweet. I'll read out the entire thing, right? Mhm.
Mhm.
So it starts off as such. Yeah. Before the earth was new, the sun was all that existed in the great universe. The sun divided the earth into several parts separated by many great lakes. In each part, he caused one man and one woman to be born. They bore children and lived for many years. Wickedness pervaded in this family, and slowly they killed one another. The sun wept and wept with grief. The tears became rain that fell from the skies until water covered the entire earth. The family had to set sail in bark canoes to save themselves from the flood. A violent wind overturned their boats. All perished in the sea, but the old man and the old woman, who were the best of all people, and it was they who populated the earth. I just realized now I've picked the wrong narrative to read. Uh,
Bro. Lock bro
my
up.
my my apologies. Sorry, that was the I started and I'm like, "Oh, wait, this isn't the one I wanted to read." But that's we can look at that one in a
Slime grow
second.
out instantly.
Yeah, yeah. My fault for not having these organized. Here's the one I
Mhm.
wanted to read. It was the Algonquian, not the Micmac. Well, of the same, yeah. Let me pull this up. Apologies.
Mhm.
We're rusty.
We are rusty. We'll lock in. Next one, we're gonna lock in. I promise.
Yeah.
Get on with it.
Here it is. Here it is. So this is an Algonquian story, specifically of a hero, uh, Nana Bozo, I think.
Yeah.
I'm
So
probably
yeah,
butchering that
Nanabozo.
pronunciation.
Nanabozo. No. You got it.
All right.
Nanabozo. So interesting. Nanabozo, or it carries that prefix bozo. Like for instance, to the Ojibwe, he's Wanabozo,
Mhm.
or Waynabozo.
Yep.
Um, he appears in a lot of myths, especially with, to my knowledge, the Potawatomi. But
Yes.
he is somewhat of like a folk hero,
Yeah, yeah.
kind of like I'm trying to think of a non-Native American example. Um,
Paul Bunyan.
Paul Bunyan, maybe Robin Hood.
Yeah, to a lesser extent. Robin Hood
I
isn't
don't know.
really.
I don't know. Not really. He's a folk hero. He's in a lot of different stories that oftentimes carry morals to them. Um, a
I've
book
got
that
the
talks about a lot of
the story pulled up here if you want.
yeah, well, a book that talks about a lot of these different, just for more information on Anaboso as a figure, a book that talks a lot about some of these is a book called Braiding Sweetgrass, um, written by a Potawatomi woman, Robin Wall Kimmer. It covers a lot of these different things, but he's a folk hero. Okay, continue.
Yeah. Here, I promise this is the correct story this time. The Anishinaabe origin story features Nanaboso camped on the bank of a river when the waters rose slowly and steadily, forcing him to retreat. Before the water covered what remained of the mountain that he stood on, Nanaboso cut 2 logs to form a crude raft. As far as he could see, in every direction there were animals of every species, many out of their element, their eyes wide and rolling in terror. He hailed the birds and animals swimming nearby. Would you fetch some soil, so I can try to restore the earth? It was not the strong or the gifted, as might be expected, who retrieved the soil. Rather, it was the least of their kin, the muskrat, who dove and brought back the small bit of soil. Nanabozo breathed into a small paw full of soil, and a miracle took place. He had created his island and his world.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that is an example of the creative flood narrative. Um, right. I know I have a few others here. The
Yeah, one I'd like
Anishinaabe.
to mention, Inishaba. Okay.
Yeah, they have a similar one where a god Michabo, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, is hunting. He has his pack of trained wolves. They go into a lake. He follows them in, and as he does so, the world floods. Right. And then we see the same thing go. This one goes a little bit more in depth. He sends a raven find some soil. The bird can't do it. He then sends an otter to find soil. Doesn't happen. And then he sends a muskrat, and the muskrat brings back the soil.
Hmm.
Um, and then the land is remade.
Yeah, this one happens again with the Ojibwe,
Hmm.
where there's a creative one, and this one kind of blends the more traditional one with the like the Native American creative flood myth, right? Like, okay, like here the Ojibwe, Wayna Bozo in the Great Flood. I'll read the first sentence or the first paragraph of it. Long ago, the world was filled with evil. Men and women lost respect for each other. The Creator was unhappy about this and decided to cause a great flood to purify the earth. Um, Wayne Bozo survives, and it goes through this same thing where he wants to rebuild the world, so he sends down different animals to bring up soil. Um, and a loon, a beaver, a mink, and then
Was it the
uh,
Ajigad?
no, this is the Ojibwe.
No, 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 I'm saying the animal.
Oh yeah, there's the Ajigad, the but it's the same story. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What I want to get into now is I'm gonna read the Choctaw,
Mhm.
the Choctaw story. So, uh, um, our people have always had the tradition of the deluge, which happened in this way. There was a total darkness for a great time over the whole of the earth. The Choctaw doctors of mystery men looked out for daylight for long, until at last they despaired of ever seeing it. The whole nation was very unhappy. At last a light was discovered in the north, and there was a great rejoicing until it was found to be great mountains of water rolling on, which destroyed them, all except for a few families who had expected it and built a great raft on which they were saved. What I want to get into this one is into this question, okay, why does North America have so many flood myths? And I think, and this is just a theory. I'm not a geologist I'm not an anthropologist or a geologist, right? But I have a budding theory, and this could be totally wrong. Do you want to hear it?
Yeah, I do wanna hear it.
Okay, so if we look back into um, North America's geological history, we know that 13,000 years ago, the Earth was covered, or not the Earth. Uh, Most parts of North America, specifically northern North America, were covered in huge ice sheets, right?
Yeah.
Um, a lot of these ice sheets were known to collect great amounts of water. And they were also prone to bursting. Two examples of this is Lake Agassiz and um, Lake Missoula. Let's stick with Lake Missoula. So when Lake Missoula burst, it covered it caused the entire when it burst, it let so much water go that it flooded almost the entire northwestern seaboard, and made what is now known as the Scablands. Um,
For those who
and
don't know, explain the Scablands.
so the Scablands, they have these big, deep divots, and for a while in the geological community, it was of great debate as to what exactly caused these. Right. Um, so a man named J. Harlan Bretz, a geologist, proposed that it it he had a theory that it was a large flood, right? Um, Now, this is an interesting story because for a long time he was greatly ridiculed for this, right? And it wasn't until much later that Lake Missoula became widely accepted among the scientific community, and he had um, right, like there were apologies and everything to him because it wasn't just like, oh, here's why we disagree with you, right? Like Harlan Bretz was like ridiculed.
Oh, yeah, geologists can be mean, dude.
Yeah, Harlan Bretz was ridiculed, and there were huge public apologies and everything. But that's Lake Missoula, and Lake Missoula, when it burst, happened 13,000 years ago. Um, given okay, so I've spoken to some people at school, and I've come to learn. You remember the White Sands footprints?
Yes.
The White Sands footprints are a little more contested than I thought they were.
Really? For the
They
audience,
are.
the White Sands footprints are a set of ancient footprints in, I believe, White Sands, Arizona, or is it New Mexico?
New Mexico. It's New
New
Mexico.
Mexico. They're a set of footprints, which fossilized. What's important about them is they had a seed pressed into this footprint, and because the seed was there, we could carbon date the footprints to about, was it 20,000 years BCE?
21,000.
21,000 BCE, and that,
The
um,
21,000 years ago. That would have
years ago,
been 19,000
19,000,
BCE.
right? And that allows us to date humans and hominid activity in North America. Also, see our first episode on that topic.
Yeah, yeah. So the white sand footprints are a little more hotly contested, but even if we're going with that, 13,000 years ago is fairly accepted for humans being in North America, right?
Right.
This means that there would have been people who would have been alive to have witnessed the bursting of Lake Missoula. And put yourself in their shoes. You're a human and you witness this flood, right?
Right.
You witness this flood and you begin to go around and you see that, and as you travel, you survive by the skin of your teeth. You go around, you begin traveling, and you see that all of the area around you was also devastated. You're probably gonna you're gonna believe that the entire world flooded,
Yeah.
right? Or at least large parts of it, and that could eventually, in storytelling, turn into the whole world flooded. And that's why I find the Choctaw one very interesting. Um, Towards that, right? Another good example of a lake that was prone to bursting was Lake Agassiz. Um, Lake Agassiz was a huge lake, and Lake Agassiz is kind of interesting because not all of it ever existed at once.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know, it's kind of like the Lake of Theseus type thing going on with Lake Agassiz. I don't know, we could talk about that. Um, but Lake Agassiz bursts, and it usually dumped into the Hudson Bay, but it would dump south at times. Um, right. So we have another example of Northern America. Um,
So you said
there's
it would
these
dump
huge
south.
floods
Where?
that are happening.
Hold on. I'm not exactly familiar with the location. Where would these lakes be located today?
Okay, so Lake Missoula would have been modern day. Uh, 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 I believe the West Coast.
Hmm.
I'm sorry, I don't have this up.
That's fine.
Okay, so modern day Washington and Idaho.
Hmm.
But modern day Washington, Idaho, and Montana. Lake Agassiz stretched mostly throughout Canada. However, at its biggest, it stretched from the Hudson Bay to southern Minnesota.
All
And
right.
we'll put up images
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
lakes for the viewers. But yeah, that's what we're looking at. Um, and keep in mind, Lake Agassiz was so big that do you know what the Younger Dryas period is?
Uh, I'm familiar, but explain it for the audience.
So the Younger Dryas was a period of intense global cooling, 12,000 years ago, and there's a lot of contested theories as to why this happens. But one of them is that Lake Agassiz dumped so much water into uh, Hudson Bay that it changed the currents and changed the climate of the planet. So that's how big this lake was, and these lakes were bursting. And people would have been witness to these massive floods, and of course, people are going to tell stories about them. But to say that floods are also, you know, were huge parts of the not native, ancient world, right? Because you had people were living by water and water floods, like with the
Yeah.
Nile and like with the Yellow River. So I think that would be a good explanation of to why we see so many flood narratives, at least the ones that we are classifying as traditional flood narratives, why we see so many of them.
I want to ask. So Lake Agassiz and Lake Missoula, would these tie in at least somewhat, around the same time as Meltwater Pulse 1B?
I don't know what that is.
Oh, okay. Uh, Let me pull up a
Hear about it.
so so Meltwater Pulse 1B, it was at the end of the Younger Dryas.
Hmm.
And it was a period of, here, I have it here, accelerated post-glacial sea level rise, right?
Hmm.
It's around the time of Doggerland sinking. See our episode on that. And
Yep.
it
Yep.
was
Yep.
it I'm forgetting the numbers exactly, but over the course of like a few hundred years, I believe 300 years, sea levels rose like 100 meters, right?
Oh my goodness.
At their peak rate of rise, it was up to, like, a few meters a year,
Mhm.
right? Estimated yeah.
Is it for the is that the man, maybe my memory's a bit rusty on exactly when Doggerland, officially flooded, but was that the primary cause?
Uh, I think it was a little bit after, but the larger, what's the word I'm looking for? The sea level rise had been common for those few hundred years. So it's not Meltwater Pulse 1b isn't directly responsible, but the larger man, I can't find the word I'm looking for. But there was throughout that time just a lot of sea level rise going on. So
Mhm,
tangentially related, not entirely. Um,
mhm,
what I wanted to get at with this, along with the Lake Agassiz and Lake Missoula, imagine, because yeah, at their peak, it would have been about a meter or two of sea level rise in a year. Um,
mhm,
imagine, a lot of our viewers, I imagine, are from New England or are living near the coast. Imagine, yeah, imagine that. Imagine the coast coming up a meter or two in a year. Imagine your house if you were within a mile, right, of the coast. Imagine your house flooding by 3 feet over the course of a year. You'd
mhm.
you'd talk about that for the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you have, and luckily we haven't in our lives seen sea level rise to that extent, but and yeah, this all is getting to what I wanted to transition to towards the end of the episode anyway, which is analyzing what these narratives tell us about the people telling them and why
Mhm,
so many cultures have it, right? So we see in North America, Lake Missoula, Lake Agassiz. We see globally, Meltwater Pulse 1b. Um, so and what I'm noticing with a lot of these narratives we're finding, say, look at Southeast Asia, look at the Abrahamic ones, look at the European ones to a lesser extent because there are less there. The North American ones
mhm,
and the South American ones, all of these are cultures that developed along the coast, right?
mhm,
So to answer the question of why do we see flood narratives on every single continent, um, the answer is simply people have always lived by water, and there have been floods everywhere, right? That have wiped out thousands.
mhm,
Um, and so when you have when you're less, how do I put this? When your whole world is only about 100 to 1,000 miles,
mhm,
and you know a large chunk of that gets wiped out, you are going to tell people in the future, like, dude, the whole world flooded, right?
mhm,
Because it's
or at least,
as they
as
knew it.
storytelling goes, maybe if you don't exaggerate it, the people you tell are very likely to.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like we saw with the Hebrew translation. Y a lot of this could be like, "Hey, the whole land flooded," and then people interpret that as, "Oh, all of land flooded," rather than the whole land that is within this area flooded,
Mhm,
you know? But now that we know we've answered the question of why does every continent have one of these, I want to flip a little bit to looking at what the different interpretations of these floods can tell us about the culture, right?
mhm. Yeah, the biggest thing that I wanna make is the ones that specifically have, you know, we can look at it'll tell us a lot about a culture's conception of God, right?
Yeah.
Um, right, specifically ones where this is happening because a god is punishing humanity for something, right? That tells us a lot about how cultures view God, right? Cultures like that are far more likely to, have like an authoritative stance on the world.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I kind of got at it, right? Like, and some of the ones where, like for instance, the Southeast Asian ones, the flood. isn't even necessarily viewed as a bad thing. It's just viewed as a force of nature, right? It's not negative or good. It's just something that happened.
Yeah, I wanted I made a note of that mentally, because Southeast Asia, uh, it just it rains all the
Yeah.
time, right? Floods are very common there. So people from to quote Forrest Gump, it even rained at night, you know? Uh, where it's just always flooding. They would come to view it as like less of a malignant thing and more of just this is something that happens, you know?
Yeah.
As opposed to people from maybe a desert region or a region that doesn't flood so often, see
Mhm.
uh, Noah and the Israelites, or the South American tribes with where it's just
Or the
not as
North American.
common, or the North Americans to an extent, yeah.
Like an
Where
example I found is that even though, like in the flood narrative, it was still it was built around a celebration, right? The flooding of the Nile was a celebration, right? Because it was fertility and they were able to practice their agriculture. But with the Egyptian one, the flood is seen as a very positive thing,
yeah,
right? Like even in the story, if we want to view like the wine and the beer as a flood, right? It is still a positive thing. It's what resolves the narrative. It's what resolves the narrative, you know.
so yeah, the flood itself, like going back to our three categories we established, the flood itself happening doesn't put it into any of these categories. It's how the people perceive it and tell of it that puts it into one of these categories. Which is why I wanted to look at what cultural aspects we can ascertain from these flood narratives, and specifically, I want to see now if we can determine any, I want to say universal truths, but that's not the right term. Any morals or values that are held universally amongst all people, right?
Mm.
So one thing I did notice is that across almost all of these, right, where you have destructive flood narratives, which
Hmm.
I believe destructive narratives are indicative of a flood that was destructive, where a lot of people were either uprooted from their homes or even died, right?
Hmm.
Um, what we see in these narratives is the idea of good people or good families surviving these floods, right?
Hmm.
Like Noah was chosen for his godliness. In the Micmac narrative, I mentioned it was an old woman and an old man who were the best of all people who survived. It's a common theme, right? What I think that tells us is less that, oh, only two people survived or only one family survived. It's no, it's the idea that good people who are selfless and willing to help others tend to ensure the survival of a people, right? Of a
Hmm.
culture. And that we want to generally, as humans, promote selflessness and good behavior, right? I
Hmm.
think this is drawn from my guess, and now I'm not, again, not experts here. This is just my taking an educated guess. Is obviously some sort of rebuilding had to happen afterwards, and I'm guessing the good people who survived the floods are a stand-in for people who sacrificed their time and their resources to help rebuild after these events.
Mm.
And I just think it's fascinating that we see that in both North America and the old world, right?
Yeah. Yeah. People who are good for other people are elevated, right?
Yeah, and I mean I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good thing. Yeah. Totally. All right. All right. We are running pretty late, so let's start wrapping this up. Uh, per usual, um, let us know what you wanted in let us know what you thought in the comments. If you want to see any if you want to see us cover any particular comment, please, or topic, please drop that in the comments. We do have the next upcoming video. I believe we are going to be looking at the. We're a bit late, but we're going to be covering the recent life on Mars.
Ooh, yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, we're going to be covering that.
Yeah, and then so
But
that'll be a fresh start episode. And as far as archaeological topics, I think the next on our list will be Göbekli Tepe.
Le
That's
LeBron on
LeBron.
LeBron on
That yeah, inside joke. We'll get into that
Oh, wait, that's gonna be like, Cerruti Mastodon, because me and you disagree on that. That's gonna be
we
another
do.
argument.
I think that so that'll be a debate style episode for us, so you have that to look forward to in the future. That's a site of a lot of recent, discussion and controversies, so that'll be fun.
I'm gonna send you to LeBron on Tepe.
He thought I made up the term Göbekli Tepe and then started saying LeBron Han Tepe, like LeBron James. It's been almost a year, he still finds it hilarious.
Oh, because it
Uh,
is hilarious.
it is hilarious. Alright, thank
I
you
think
for
it's more
watching.
fun it is okay, yeah, yeah. Thank you for watching. Drop a like and comment. We'll catch you on the next one.
See ya.